I want you to sit with a thought most men avoid until it corners them. You wake up one morning past 45 and, on paper, everything is fine. Nobody is calling you a failure. The bills are paid. The responsibilities are handled. You're not in crisis. You're not falling apart. And yet there's this quiet weight in your chest that won't move. Not panic, not drama, not depression the way movies sell it. Just a steady, stubborn sense that the life you built is running, but it isn't yours anymore. Like you're living inside a schedule you didn't personally sign. That's the part that scares men, because it doesn't look like an emergency. It looks like stability, and stability is the most convincing prison on earth. You tell yourself it's normal. Every man feels this. Be grateful. Stop being dramatic. Keep going. Grind it out. Handle it. You swallow the restlessness and keep adding years to a structure that was designed for a version of you that doesn't exist anymore. What most men don't realize is that this isn't a breakdown. It's a signal. It's time turning from an abstract idea into something personal. When you're 25, time feels infinite. When you're 35, time feels like a resource. When you're 45, time starts to feel like a receipt. You don't think in decades anymore. You think in remaining energy, in clarity, in how many mornings you have left where you actually feel awake inside your own life. And once that awareness arrives, it doesn't go away. You can't unsee it. That's why men at this stage sometimes make moves that confuse everyone around them. They step away from roles, titles, routines, even relationships that once gave them identity, but now only give them fatigue. To the outside world, it looks reckless. To them, it feels precise, calculated, necessary. This isn't about running from responsibility. It's about taking responsibility for the one thing nobody can do for you: authorship. Because the regret most men fear isn't the regret of leaving. It's the regret of staying after honesty demanded movement. There's a specific clarity that shows up when you accept a hard truth. Approval won't follow you into the second half of your life. Applause doesn't sit with you at 2 a.m. Titles don't hold your hand when your body starts sending warnings. Good job doesn't make you feel real. And when you stop negotiating with the illusion that other people's understanding is required, something strange happens. You get calm. Not because life gets easy, because life gets clean. You stop asking, do they get it? And you start asking, do I? That's where the reset begins, quietly, internally, not with a dramatic announcement, but with a private refusal to keep trading time for validation. And once that refusal takes root, the old life starts to loosen its grip. You make room for something leaner, simpler, and far more honest. What comes next isn't chaos, it's intention. But to understand why so many men choose this path without regret, you have to understand what they're finally walking away from. What they're walking away from isn't life, it's distortion. Let me make this plain. The shift after 45 is not driven by fear. It's driven by precision. Fear reacts. Precision chooses. A man who changes course at this stage usually isn't escaping life. He's finally designing it. There's a difference, and it matters. When you're younger, you chase accumulation because you think it will solve something. Money, status, bigger house, better car, more recognition. The promise is always the same. When you get enough, you'll feel aligned. When you get enough, you'll feel secure. When you get enough, you'll feel like you. But by midlife, you've seen what status gives and what it doesn't. You've seen the trade. You get competence, but you lose time. You get stability, but you lose freedom. You get needed, but you stop feeling alive. So the question changes. It stops being, how do I get more? And becomes, what is worth my remaining energy? That shift is everything. Because now time isn't theoretical. You feel it in your body, in your patience, in how quickly your tolerance for nonsense disappears. You start noticing how much of your day is spent maintaining appearances instead of living with direction. And once you see it, continuing on the same path stops feeling like discipline. It starts feeling like self betrayal. Here's what makes it dangerous: it doesn't happen overnight. Careers don't collapse, they become machines. Machines that reward endurance but drain identity. Routines don't break, they harden. They become rituals of avoidance. Relationships don't explode, they settle into contracts of familiarity, stable, functional, polite, while growth quietly starves. And because it's not dramatic, you normalize the dissatisfaction. You call it adulthood. You call it responsibility. You call it maturity. But deep down, you know what it is: misalignment. And misalignment is expensive, not in dollars, in self respect. That's why what looks radical from the outside often feels like a correction on the inside. A return to honesty. A man doesn't leave because he has no direction. He leaves because he finally found it. The most dangerous trap. It's working well enough. The most dangerous moment in a man's life isn't when everything falls apart. It's when everything works well enough to keep him stuck. Because when life is fine, you never get the clean break. You never get the obvious reason to change. So you drift, you tolerate, you keep going. You become dependable in a life you don't even want. That's how decades disappear. Not through disaster, through maintenance. And the hardest part to admit is this: many men aren't held back by fear of failure. They're held back by fear of disrupting the version of them other people rely on. The provider, the stable one, the responsible one, the man who doesn't rock the boat, the man who can handle it. That identity wins you respect. It wins you praise. It wins you trust, but it can also cost you your life because you start living as a function instead of a person. You become useful, but not free. What changes after 45? Your priorities stop taking orders. At this stage, the motivations that guide you aren't loud anymore. They aren't external. They're internal and non-negotiable. One of the strongest is the awareness of finitude, not the dramatic, I'm going to die tomorrow version, the grounded version, the one that makes you realize certain chapters don't reopen once they close. This doesn't create panic, it creates selectivity. You get protective of your attention. You get serious about your time. You start asking, who has access to me? And what am I paying for with my days? What used to feel manageable starts to feel invasive. Meetings that exist to feed the meeting machine. Conversations that have no point. Projects that keep systems alive but don't serve anything you believe in. You don't hate them, you just stop consenting to them. Burnout shows up here too, but not the pop culture version where you just need a vacation. This isn't exhaustion from overwork. This is exhaustion from working without meaning. You can be highly capable in an environment that no longer fits you. And capability is a trap when it keeps you in a role you've outgrown. Then something else starts resurfacing. The interests you postponed, not abandoned, postponed. The creative instinct, the physical challenge, the curiosity that used to keep you sharp, the idea you shelved because it wasn't practical. What changes isn't the desire, it's the willingness to prioritize it. Because by midlife, you've learned a brutal truth. Waiting for permission is a strategy that guarantees delay. And money, this is big. Money loses its position as the main driver. It still matters. You're not naive. You respect reality, but it stops commanding you. You've seen that security without engagement is just a nicer form of emptiness. So men start redirecting resources toward agency, experiences, projects, skills, health, time, things that make them feel in control of their own lives again. This shift isn't anti responsibility, it's refined responsibility. It's a man finally asking, do my daily actions match the man I respect? And when they don't, tension builds until it demands resolution. That's why some men choose a path that looks solitary. Not because they hate people, but because clarity often requires distance from noise. When fewer voices are in your head, decisions get cleaner. You stop performing your life. You start inhabiting it. The quiet power of chosen solitude. There's a moment I've seen repeat itself in different forms. A man sits alone, actually alone, not scrolling, not numbing, not distracted, and realizes how rare true stillness has been in his life. No demands, no explaining, no audience, just space. At first, that space can feel unsettling because for years your identity was reinforced by motion, by being needed, by keeping things running. When the noise disappears, you hear yourself again, and that can be uncomfortable. But then something unfamiliar appears, clarity without urgency. You start noticing how much energy you spent managing reactions instead of building direction. How often your choices were shaped by avoiding conflict, avoiding disappointment, avoiding judgment. How much of your life was a negotiation with other people's expectations? This is where autonomy stops being a concept and becomes an experience. Making decisions without a committee, changing course without asking for permission, working deeply on something that matters to you without interruption. These aren't dramatic freedoms. They're small, but they compound. And over time, they rebuild something most men don't realize they lost: self trust. That's why you'll see men at this stage do things that look like less to outsiders: downsize instead of upgrade, move to a place where nobody knows their resume, leave the social scene that kept them distracted, work early mornings on a craft nobody applauds. To the outside world, it looks like withdrawal. To the man, it's concentration. Because the real advantage of a simpler path isn't fewer people, it's less distortion. When fewer expectations press against you, your internal signals get clearer. You can feel what fits and what doesn't. You can tell when something is real and when it's just obligation dressed as virtue. And here's what surprises a lot of men: chosen solitude doesn't make you cold, it makes you intentional. Connections become fewer, but cleaner. You stop using relationships to escape discomfort or confirm identity. You stop needing people as anchors. People become additions again, and that is a healthier way to live. Why they don't regret it later. When men look back years later, what stands out isn't what they gained, it's what they stopped carrying. The pressure to perform, the constant background anxiety of, am I doing enough? The resentment that builds when your life looks successful but feels hollow. The fatigue of explaining yourself to people who benefit from your compliance. Letting go of those burdens creates space for something more valuable than achievement: internal coherence. And contentment at this stage is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up as a nervous system that finally rests, as mornings that begin without dread, as work that absorbs you instead of draining you, as relationships that feel like choice, not duty. Success stops being public. It becomes private, a simple agreement between who you are and how you live. Many men realize their earlier definitions of fulfillment were borrowed, handed down by culture, family, peers. They assumed meaning would arrive if they followed the blueprint. When it doesn't, they blame themselves. But the truth is often this: the blueprint was never designed for your alignment, it was designed for your compliance. The shift happens when a man stops asking, "Am I doing this right?" and starts asking, "Is this true for me?" That question changes everything because judgment doesn't disappear, it just loses authority. You understand that nobody else lives inside your consequences. Their approval doesn't pay the cost of your regret. Their opinions don't carry your stress. Their applause doesn't fix your emptiness. So you stop defending your choices. You start owning them. And when you own your trade-offs, regret has nowhere to attach itself. The cost of ignoring the signal. Now let's talk about the other side. The part men don't want to face. Ignoring misalignment doesn't usually punish you with disaster. It punishes you with repetition. Days blur. Weeks pass without distinction. You stay busy, but something essential stays untouched. Many men mistake numbness for stability, but numbness is just deferred dissatisfaction with interest. When a man senses misalignment and refuses to act, the cost is paid internally. Irritability becomes normal. Motivation becomes brittle. You start resenting the people around you, not because they're wrong, but because you're not being honest. You're present in body, absent in conviction. That creates tension in relationships because people can feel when you're living half a life. Even if you don't say it, even if you keep showing up, the energy changes. And slowly, quietly, self-respect erodes, not because life is hard, but because you know you're capable of more honesty than you're allowing yourself. This is how men end up later in life, burdened not by what they tried and failed at, but by what they never allowed themselves to do. The weight isn't the mistakes, it's the unmade decisions. And unexpressed potential doesn't vanish. It turns inward. It becomes cynicism. It becomes bitterness. It becomes a man who tells younger men it doesn't matter, because admitting it matters would expose what he didn't have the courage to pursue. That's the real tragedy, not failure, avoidance. This isn't about burning your life down, it's about taking it back. Here's the part I want to be responsible with. Alignment does not require you to torch your life overnight. Not every man needs to quit his job and move to the mountains. Not every man needs a dramatic reinvention. A lot of men don't need a revolution. They need a recalibration. And that starts with interruption. Interrupting unconscious repetition. Interrupting obligations you know. Longer believe in. Interrupting the habit of saying yes to avoid discomfort. Small acts of alignment matter. They compound like interest. Here's a practical way to think about it. No theory, just reality. 1. Do an energy audit. For 1 week, track what gives you energy and what drains it. Not what you should enjoy. What you actually feel in your body. Some things drain you because they're hard. That's fine. But some things drain you because they're hollow. Those are the ones you have to confront. 2. Separate responsibility from performance. Some obligations are real. Children, health, finances. Keep those. But ask yourself, where am I performing a role to maintain an image? Where am I doing things because I'm afraid of what people will think if I stop? 3. Identify your non-negotiables now, not at 30. Your values at 45 aren't your values at 30. They shouldn't be. What matters now? Health, time, craft, freedom, family, peace. Get specific. Vague values don't guide decisions. 4. Start a season of subtraction. Before you add anything new, remove what's unnecessary. Cut one commitment. Drop one obligation that exists only out of habit. creates space. You can't design a new life on top of an overloaded one. 5. Rebuild your body like it matters. This isn't vanity, it's leverage. Your energy, mood, discipline, confidence, most of it rides on your physiology. Men hit midlife and treat their bodies like an afterthought, then wonder why everything feels heavy. Fix the foundation. Sleep, strength, mobility, nutrition, not extreme, consistent. 6. Have one honest conversation you've been avoiding. Sometimes the prison is not the job, it's the silence. Whether it's with a partner, a family member, a boss, or yourself, say what's true, not cruelly, cleanly. A man who can speak truth without drama stops being controlled by avoidance. 7. Build one thing that is yours. A project, a skill, a craft. Something that doesn't exist to impress anybody. Something that makes you feel competent and alive. Men need that. And not as a hobby to kill time, but as proof you still have agency. That's how the shift begins. Not with chaos, with clean choices. The final truth most men feel, but rarely say. Here's what remains when you strip away all the noise. Peace is not found by arranging the world correctly. Peace is found by arranging yourself honestly. When your actions stop contradicting your values, life gets quieter. Not easier, quieter, clearer. And clarity reduces suffering more than control ever will. The men who change course after 45 aren't chasing happiness the way they once did. They aren't negotiating with fantasy. They understand life will always have friction, uncertainty, and loss. The difference is this: now those things exist inside a framework they chose, not one they inherited. That distinction changes everything. A calmness shows up when you accept responsibility for your direction without demanding guarantees about the outcome. You stop asking life to promise comfort. You ask it for truth. And truth, even when it's uncomfortable, doesn't drain you the way pretense does. It steadies you. That's why these men don't speak with regret. Not because every decision worked perfectly, but because the decisions were owned. Regret fades when you know you acted in alignment with what you understood at the time. What remains is integrity, and integrity is a man's deepest form of confidence. If you're younger hearing this, don't wait for age to give you permission. Age doesn't create clarity. Honesty does. And if you're already feeling that quiet weight, if you recognize the misalignment, this isn't condemnation. It's an invitation. You don't need to vanish. You don't need to announce a dramatic reinvention. You don't need to blow up your life to take it back. You need to stop lying to yourself about what drains you and what sustains you. That alone begins the shift. A man centered within himself becomes difficult to rush, manipulate, or provoke. His worth isn't dependent on applause or the avoidance of criticism. He moves deliberately. He speaks plainly. He chooses trade-offs without bitterness. That isn't withdrawal from life. That is engagement without distortion. And the outcome is simple. You stop living to be approved of. You start living to be at peace with yourself. Because when the noise finally quiets and you're alone with your own life, the only opinion that matters is the one you can't escape, your own.